for joining this session. So, as you know, this session is about Salesforce automation, know when to code in Salesforce, and we have our speaker with us. Houssam is a Salesforce application architect, Salesforce MVP, and has 16 Salesforce certifications. Fully involved in the Salesforce ecosystem and a trailblazer community. Uh, he actually shares his knowledge in three languages: Arabic, French, and English. That's cool. So yeah, that's all about the introduction. Passing to Hussam. Over to you for your session, Hussam.
Thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending your time zone. Welcome. Let me start by saying thank you. Thank you for taking the time to meet up with us today and for giving me also the opportunity to share with you my knowledge and my passion. I truly appreciate your interest and thanks to the organizers and the sponsors for making this conference possible. So, today we are going to learn together about Salesforce automation and when you want to write code in Salesforce. And it will be my pleasure to take you through this session. And Salesforce is much more than CRM. In fact, is a complete business automation platform. And after this session, we will be able to help your company to go to the next level and discover the power that Salesforce can bring you from an automation perspective. I choose this topic because, in my opinion, the first common mistake that we can see from some Salesforce developers or admins is using the wrong tool for the job. In this session, we will put and end the age-old question: should we solve this using code? And when you want to write code. But before we start, let's talk a little bit about my favorite topic, me, myself, and I. So my name is Houssam SAOUDY, and I'm working at Capgemini Morocco as a Salesforce technical lead. This means also I'm senior developer with the deep knowledge of the Salesforce ecosystem, and I understand how to use the CRM technology to transform a business accomplishing specific goals and achieving critical outcomes. And I have written lots of many codes for lots of customers around the world. I'm also a Salesforce MVP, very first Salesforce MVP in Africa, which basically means I'm fully involved in Salesforce ecosystem and the Trailblazer community. And as you know, I share my knowledge with the three languages, Arabic, French, and English. I have 16 Salesforce certifications, including Platform Developer 2 and Application Architect, my favorite one. I'm also the leader of the Casablanca Developer Group, the first community group in Africa. I'm also the founder and organizer of the North Africa Dreaming, the first sales community conference in Africa. I'm also a speaker. I did lots of presentation with a lot of groups around the world, and also I spoke last year at Dreamforce. So thank you for joining me, and let's start. Here is an overview of the topic we will cover during this session. First, I will teach you about all the tools available to you in Salesforce for automating. And we will discover, for example, what means workflow, flow, process builder. After that, we will start by reviewing the programmatic tools. And after that, we start answer our question when and when not to code. And also we will see also where do you can use Apex code, and I will do for you a quick demo how to write your Apex code or a trigger. So let's talk now about the Salesforce automation capabilities. The first one is the full code capability. With code, you can create anything that you desire by leveraging the Lightning Component framework and the Apex programming language. That's great solution to use when you need to program very precise user experience elements or pieces of code that can't easily be developed in the declarative tools of Salesforce. The second level is the low code capability. Code is still required, but it's created in accessible environments that leverage a visual programming language and minimal requirements to use Apex. And finally, the no code or declarative features that will help us to automate our manually tasks. This is the easiest way to develop an automation solution without writing any code. Minimal programming understanding is required to use this method as everything is configured in a point and click format. So, which one do we use and when? You should always start by asking yourself if something is possible using a declarative approach. And maybe you ask yourself why we need to start with declarative automation over everything else. So, let's see what the advantages of declarative automation. Because it has a lot of advantage. First, no coding skills are required. You should still be able to think in a computer think, also called algorithmic thinking. That is, you need to be able to comprehend the logic behind the computer programs. If you understand variables, logic branching, loops, database tables, and the like, you should be good. Second, there is no need to hire a specialist coder or software developer. If you are in charge, for example, for a small company or a startup, you need to save money whenever you can. Every new hire counts, and when it might not even be for a permanent position, anyway, to avoid hiring can make all the difference. For one thing, you will save a lot of money on a full-time salary, as well as resources needed for hiring and onboarding people. Furthermore, the savings will allow you to devote more time to other essential aspects for your job. And third reason, declarative programming provide a much quicker turnaround. Timing is everything in business. Lots of IT leaders say that speed of application or project delivery is a critical or very important KPI. And many of IT leaders say that improving the speed of development cycles is a critical or higher priority. A declarative programming platform will allow you a project allow for your project to be developed much quicker than if you had to write the code yourself. Declarative automation is fast to put in place, and it requires minimal maintenance also and updating efforts. And there are lots of other many reasons that you should put to start yourself for in declarative automation. For example, you also can support it across updates by Salesforce with no regression if you use, for example, a flow or a process builder. Well, how many of you have used workflow rules? How about process builder? How about flows? You can write your answer on the chat. So let's start by reviewing the declarative automation tools that we have in Salesforce. Declarative means that we can use our mouse to leverage these tools. No coding required. We need to discuss this because, as I said, in my experience, lots of developers code because they don't properly understand the declarative tool sets. There is so much that can done in Salesforce with these declarative automation tools. So let's take a look at what we have in our toolbox. The first and the most common used admin tool is the workflow rule. So let's look first at the good thing about workflow. First, it's easy to use. It's a simple tool. It's a very intuitive. It's the original tool that started point and click automation in Salesforce. Workflow can automate many business processes and can access most standard and custom objects in Salesforce. A workflow rules does two things exceptionally well. First, it's a great at doing some object field updates. And the second, the workflow rules are also especially good at sending out email notifications. The best part about workflow rules is they are easy to set up and they have rock solid reliability. Now let's look at the downsides of workflow. Workflow can just do four things. It can create a task, send an email, update a record, or send an outbound message to another software application. It cannot create or delete records. Workflow can only be invoked when a record changes. The save button must be engaged either on created or edited of records. You have no control over execution order of workflow, and it only supports one if then statement. For many users, that causes a lot of workflows to have to be created to meet business needs. Also, workflow is limited in associated objects that it can access. It can only access some field on related master objects. So that's workflow, the good and the bad. Now let's talk about the process builder. The use process builder when you need to start behind the scenes business processes automatically. Process can start when you want to update any record related to object record. Process builder supports more actions than workflow, such as creating shutter posts, updating child records, and creating records. It also supports versioning. You can control the order or execution with a nice drag and drop interface in Process Builder. And it supports multiple if-then statements. You can create all the logic branches that you wish and order them as you wish. Process Builder can be invoked by changes in the record just like workflow, but also by another process. Process Builder also supports triggering on platform events. Process Builder can update any related record regardless of whether the objects are related with a loop or a master detail relationship. So, overall, Process Builder is far more powerful than workflow. And since workflow will not get any further enhancements, people should be using Process Builder instead of workflow. Now let's take a look at bad things of the Process Builder. Process Builder can create records, but you can't grab the ID of the newly created record and do something with it. Process Builder does not support user interaction. You can't display a screen and run the process based on the user input into that screen. Process Builder cannot delete records also. It can create them, but it cannot delete them. And here is a big annoyance. You can schedule sometimes also Process Builder, but it's not like flow as we will discover now. So what are the flows? Well, flows are a low-code visual approach to programming. All of the basics concept that you may be used to come in from more classic programming languages like C or Java are available in Flow. So, code itself is written visually with describing a flow chart or of the flow on the actions to be taken by the code. A flow starts from its entry point, then follows the arrows you defined and performs the action it encounters. Certain artifacts like if decision threads, variables, database, create, read, modify, and delete actions, etc., are all available for you to leverage. Now, since it's pretty easy to understand how to visualize, flow are considered by Salesforce as a low code approach. Now, um, there are two type also of flows that you can need to know. The first type are screen flows. It's a very nice feature you can use in flows is the screen feature. This allows you to put in place a graphical user interface without code for your user to interact directly with your flows. This is very useful for them to follow as defined process and get understandable feedback right away. The second type are auto-launched flows. Those flows execute in the background without any user interaction. Because of this, they are very similar to workflow rules or process builder, which also run in the background. And there are also bad thing about the flows. You need to. It's a learning curve. The learning curve is long, and sometimes it's difficult to do all business logic with the flow. And at this time, we should start think about writing codes. So, oh yes, now we are into on the good stuff. Let's talk about coding technology. There are two general types of coding technology. Even if you are on the Salesforce platform, or maybe not, the first is backend code. Backend code is automation that happens on the database level, meaning this type of code typically manipulates Salesforce records and fields. There are three programming constructs in Salesforce that deal with the backend code. All three generally fall under the Apex code name, and all three are commonly used together at the same time. The second type of code is front-end code. Front-end code works on the user interface, also known as the UI. There are three types of front-end coding languages and in Salesforce. The first is Visual Force. Visual Force is a web development framework that enables developers to build sophisticated custom user interfaces for mobile and desktop apps that can be hosted on the Lightning platform. You can use Visual Force to build apps that align with the styling of the Lightning experience, as well as your own completely custom interface. And we have also the Lightning Component Framework. The Lightning Component Framework is the UI framework for developing web apps for mobile and desktop devices. It's a modern framework for building single page application with dynamic, responsive user interface for Lightning platform apps. It uses JavaScript on the client side and Apex on the server side. We have also the Lightning component, web component. The Lightning web component is the newest front-end coding language, and it lets you build applications that follow the new Lightning style UI. It's it's much more modern, and it's also much faster. Let's talk now about the automation order of execution because it's important. When you save a record with an insert, update, or upsert statement, Salesforce performs the following events in this order. First, is load initial records. Second, if the request came from a standard UI edit page, Salesforce runs system validation to check the record for page layout, specific rules, field definition, and maximum field length. Third, executes flows that make a before save update. After that, they executes all before triggers. After that, they runs most custom validation rules. After that, they execute duplicate rules. After that, it saves the record to the database, but it doesn't commit yet. After that, he executes all after triggers. After that, he executes the assignment rules. After that, he executes auto response rules. After that, it executes workflow rules. If there are workflow field updates, then it updates the record again. After that, it executes processes and flow. After that, execute escalation rules. After that, execute unsettlement rules. After that, execute record triggered flows that are configured to run after the record is saved. After that, if the record contains a rollup summary field or it's part of a cross-object workflow, performs calculation and updates the rollup summary field in the parent records. Parent records goes through save procedure. And if the parent record is updated and a parent record contains a rollup summary field or it's part of a cross object workflow, performance calculations and update the rollup summary field in the grandparent records. Grandparent records goes through save procedure. After that, Salesforce executes criteria-based sharing evaluation. After that, Salesforce commits all DML operations to the database. And finally, Salesforce executes all after commit logic, such as sending email. So this is the order of automation. And as a Salesforce consultant, as a Salesforce developer, as a Salesforce admins, you should know this because it's very important. So now let's start to answer the question when not to code. You should consider this first. You should ask yourself this question: is the development is really needed? If no, you should refuse to write code. You should also to write Apex code and build a solution with. And you need to start to build a solution with the declarative tools. After that, you need to answer this question: can it build declaratively? That means with the workflow rules, the process builder, flows, etc. If yes, then ask yourself, is the declarative solution really complex? If not, so build declarative your future. And you need to test after deploy in production, and after you can deploy in production. But what if the declarative solution it's really complex, or we can't build the declarative tools? So stop and think about building your future with a code. Use Apex when you need more functionality than it's available in Process Builder or Flow Builder. So now let's look at some of the places where Apex is still the way to go. Code can be executed whenever a database operation is performed. such as record is added regardless of what causes of the operation. But jobs are scheduled events that iterate over many records. We can also use Apex code on the web services. You can use Apex to share records also. You can also use Apex code to send emails. You can also custom transactional logic if you want. And you can also attach custom logic to another operation. So it's very important, even if you are an admin, to know a little bit about Apex code. And as an admin, I advise you to start to discover the first trigger. Why? Because it's a simple a way to start to write your first Apex code, and it's easy. Wait. What is a trigger? A trigger, according to Wikipedia, it's a database trigger, is a procedural code that is automatically executed in Salesforce to certain events. Blah, 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 blah. You can read more in Wikipedia. But according to Apex Developer Guide, a trigger is Apex code that executes before or after the following types of operations: insert, update, delete, merge, upsearch, and delete. And you can learn more. I just put the link here. You can take a screenshot if you want. And what is a trigger in admin terms? Triggers are like workflows, process builder, and flows, only created via code, and it's also flexible. They do specific things to specific records when you tell them to. So now let's see an example of or the basic structure of a trigger. Let's look at the way that triggers are structured. So first, you are going to define the type of the file. So we are using that keyword trigger to say that what a trigger word is, and then you put your name. So when you want to create a trigger, you should put here the name. After that, you need to choose the object, and after that, you need to put an action when you want to the trigger to run. For example, you can create a record and call the trigger. You can create a code trigger and call the trigger hello world trigger and execute this trigger on the account object, and you can execute this trigger before insert. And below you can find a lot of actions. For example, if you want to execute your triggers before insert, update, delete, you can do that. And you can also execute your trigger after an action. For example, after insert, after update, after delete, and also after in delete. There are two ways to write triggers, with the best practice when our trigger calls out to the one or two more classes, and classes contains the code that does stuff, and the common practice when the trigger contain other code that does stuff. Today I will present for you the common practice because it's easy to learn for admins, and because I know there are other session about triggers today. So this is an example how to write a simple, very simple trigger. So When you want to create a trigger, you start by the trigger keyword. After that, you put your name, for example, hello account trigger on, and here you put your object, and after that, you put the action before insert. So what happens here when we want to insert a record? We put this word hello trailblazer community in the description filed in account object. This is very simple for to start to write your first Apex code. And also we have here a second example when you want to write your Apex code or a trigger. This is an example on a contact object. We can execute our this trigger after insert on account object. When you want to create a new contact, we create a case and we put a subject for this case. For example, send me a free Pakistan Ramin 21 t-shirt, and the priority is very urgent. And we can associate this case to this contact. And after that, we need to insert our case. This is a very simple example about triggers, about automation we using Apex code. And when you want to write this code, you need encoding editors. So now let's get a talk about the where to write the code. The first thing you need to do is choose a coding editor. This is where you are going to write all your code. The first coding editor available to you in the developer console. Developer console is integrated development environment where you can create, debug, and test apps in your org. The developer console is connected to one org and it's a browser based. If you want your changes to be effective immediately and you don't want to install anything on your computer, I recommend the developer console. The second coding editor that will recommend, that I can recommend for you, is Visual Studio Code. And as a developer, it's very important to have the best tools to get your job done. For this reason, Visual Studio Code is the best coding editor out there. You can install Visual Studio Code on any computer running Mac OS, Windows, or Linux. The system requirements are fairly small, so it should run or just about any machine. So if you want to connect to multiple orgs, compare to or synchronize files, or use version control, the Salesforce extensions for Visual Studio Code is your best option. But I recommend the developer console today. Maybe we have with us today admins that just want to start to write your first code because it's more easy for them. So today I will show for you a quick demo using a developer console because I assume maybe we have with us today some admins without any developer background. So now it's demo time. So let me just, so as you see here, this is my fresh org. As I said, when you want to create your first automation with the code, I recommend using developer console. So you need only to click here and choose developer console. And when your developer console are opened, you can start to create your first trigger. And the way it's very simple. You need to click here, files, file, new, and choose Apex trigger. After that, here you can put the name, for example, case 2. After that, we can choose here the name of the object, for example, case, and you can click on the submit button. So as you see, this is the same code as we saw, which is other during my presentation today. I already prepared for you two examples just because we don't have times to go through and write Apex write triggers. I already created for you two triggers. First one is hello account trigger. I execute this trigger on the account object before insert, and after that I push this word hello Trailblazer community on the description field in the account object. So remember, when I want to insert an account, I need to put this word or this phrase in the description field. So let's see. So this is my account object, and this is my new button. So let me create test today, back dreaming, for example, and let me just click the save button. So I just created an account, and as you can see here, I put this value on the description field. So we can do that with the process builder if you want, with the flow, but I want just to introduce trigger for you. And the second example, it's on the contact object. So when after insert on the contact object, I will create a new case with a subject and priority. And I will put this phrase, send me a free Pakistan Dreaming t-shirt, please. And the priority is very urgent because the t-shirt is very awesome. And I can assign this case to a contact. So let's see a demo. So this is my contact object. So I will create a new contact. For the first name, let's put Sana Kumal. For the last name, let's save our contact. And then we create a new case. So we need to send a free Pakistan Dreaming t-shirt to Sana Komal, and the priority is very urgent because she helped us to moderate this session. So this is just a few example about writing Apex trigger code, Apex code using code and we using automation. So there are many resources that we have on Trailhead. So I recommend hardly to start your career using this platform. Uh, Personally, I started my Salesforce journey before before Trailhead, and it was very difficult to improve my level quickly. But thanks to Trailhead, today all developers, all admins can build fast, robust applications. So here's some resources that I can recommend for you. So you can there are many super batches, for example, process automation specialist. There are also other models like Flow Builder. There are other resources like Apex Basic for admins. Maybe we have some admins today. We can write your Apex triggers. You can also uh, read on the discover what is SOCL for admins. So this is some models that I recommend to you to start your journey with. And with that, I just want to thank you all. Thank you for your attention. I appreciate that you are here today. I hope I helped admins and also a developer to understand how they can choose the right tool to write their code or the futures. And please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me, to send me a message on Twitter, on LinkedIn. I'm very open, and I can respond if you send me a message. So, thank you all. I really appreciate you are here today. And if you have any question, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your great presentation.